Good evening, Hivers. From the upper terraces of the Spire to the lowest boondocks of the Sump Overreach, we are the sound of Vox-Free Innsmouth, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio.
You know, Gabo, just because you call it good doesn't mean the mid-hives aren't pissing rain down into the under-hive tangle. But at least it's clean rain from time to time. You can even drink it. It's sterile, if you like the taste.
Still tastes like boots and hot lead.
Better than some things I've tasted recently.
We'll get to that in a bit. In Hive news, the so-called prophet of Dagon's bladed descent has been stirring up trouble in the Hive stacks around the Thermocore, with bladed descent cultists clashing with glass eaters all over the Iron Pite Manufacturum districts.
And we are staying out of range of flailing weapons, pitchforks, and unbridled arson here at Joe's Sump Shack, home of the cheddar lobster sump crust biscuit. All you can eat. They serve them all the time, all day, as long as you're paying for other food.
And you know, at Joe's, they are way better than all of that crap that you can find on the VoxNet. People trying to copy the recipe. Just go to Joe's. They're better there.
Yeah, get some of those sump biscuits, sump crust biscuit.
As always, I am your neon-crested plasma freak Goblin King, joined today by the mad chain-axe maniac himself, Marky.
What it is, people.
And as always, the beast of Baskerville Alley, Beast himself.
Hello, everyone.
And back from his exploration of all things sump fungi is our fun guy himself, Kev. Tell us, Kev, how are all of those toadstools?
I mean, toadstools is kind of a strange name, because they neither hop nor can you sit on them.
That's where you went with that. Marky, what do you think a toadstool is?
But they do smell like shit.
They taste like grass and dirt.
Toadstool, man. That's the guy from Mario.
There you go.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into part 2 of the creeping terror a Genestealer cult might bring to any world they are intending to infect. Right up top, we want to remind listeners that a lot of the Genestealer and Tyrannid stuff is pretty deep into uncomfortable body horror topics, so this is probably the best time to just assume that we are going to dip in and out of Purity Seal moments through parts of today's episode. However, to kick us off and to lay down some flavor, Marky, why don't you serenade us?
Yes. Pure strain, if I could speak properly.
Pure stain.
Pure strain. Pure stain. Pure strain Genestealers. Son of a bitch, shut the fuck up.
How does it feel, Marky?
trying to get in the scene here. Pure strain Genestealers propagate with hideous alien fecundity, infecting generations of Imperial prey until the time is right to strike. Each new batch of offspring seems more human than the last, as the Xenos germ seed is seemingly diluted, but within, the shape of the beast lurks unchanged. At the culmination of the curse's cycle, alien nightmares are born anew.
Very nice. All right. So last episode, we covered the details of how each generation is brought into the cult as part of the greater life cycle of the Genestealer itself. To continue on, we're going to switch our focus onto how those generations act, talk a little bit more about the culture of the cult, and look at how they might work to begin undermining a planet. Hey, I'm doing the thing.
Sorry.
You want me to
Pure strain. Pure strain.
Pure stains.
Pure strain.
God damn it, Kevin.
I have this vague memory of antipathy, like a half-forgotten dream where the greater patriarch was rendered as a monster. Instead of love, I felt hate, revulsion, even terror. The memory is thin as cobwebs now, at the back of the mind, a curio of the psyche, with which to entertain the youngsters, and nothing more.
That is Eldar Neoko, the 5th of the first of 9.
A lot of kids.
Oh, yeah. So to kick this off, we're going to talk about the differences in brief between a patriarch and a broodlord. Go ahead.
So if that's fifth of 9, does that make that the older sibling of 7 of 9?
I imagine that's probably where they got the thing.
Yeah,
because it's 5th of the 1st of 9. So it's either the
because batch
5th
creation.
Yeah, it's got to be like some like birthing pool thing. We want to cover two things up top here. First off, the patriarch and the broodlord are very, very similar in a lot of ways, but they are very distinctly different. So we wanted to cover the differences between those. And then to get a little bit into the Tyranid connection, we're going to talk about the difference between the hive mind and the brood mind. So to start us off, the patriarch. At the heart of any cult is a genestealer that sets the entire cycle of infection into motion. Known as the patriarch, this is a specialized mutation of the bioform that only undergoes these changes after they've enslaved their first mind. They have control over all minions underneath them, each Genestealer cultist of every single generation. This is done with subtle changes done to the brains of the infected, which is then passed down to their offspring, a mutation that creates, this is a mutation that begins the process of creating the brood mind. This is an act of like shared sentience, making the cult extremely tight-knit and incredibly loyal, not only to each other, but to the patriarch as well. This is an extreme edge when the cult goes into battle, as like the Tyranids, they're going to be able to act a little bit more like a single organism and not necessarily like an army. You don't have a bunch of competing egos or competing ideas. There's definitely one single boss that's calling the shots and pointing the way to go.
One mind, one goal.
In many cases, the insurrections and plans the cult execute in order to undermine their host societies have actually been in the works or planned for decades. Each member of the cult having prepared their entire lives to execute this single set of the patriarch's master plan. Not only that, but as we covered in the last episode, the infection has a tendency to grow exponentially. Each generation is bigger than that of the last, and they breed at an even greater speed. Marky, you had brought this up last time. They kind of beat around the bush, but there's a lot. They talk a lot about breeding. They talk.
They definitely beat a lot. They definitely beat a lot of bush. I'm telling you what.
I was gonna say, I don't think they beat around the bush.
I brought up a secondary. Yeah, that was a secondary sex characteristic right there, wasn't it? Yeah. So they definitely, the Genestealer kiss is passing on the infection, but the people who have been infected are also having kids constantly. So you've got this kind of like double-sided thing where every time, the first person that the Genestealer infects goes out and has a kid. And then the second person that the Genestealer infects goes out and has a kid. But then those kids come back as aberrants. And then the Genestealer and those two aberrants can kiss 3 people. Those 3 people have kids. Those come back. Then there's 9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, like the Genestealer is not stopping. The Genestealer doesn't like abduct one person and then go retreat to his throne.
No, not at all.
Unless
they're definitely on the prowl.
Unless he's
for
this guy,
a good amount of time. Yeah,
and then maybe
he hits 1 or 2, and he's like, "Oh God, I'm fucking out of breath."
Lord have mercy if I wasn't so fat.
Germacetus. So as they breed and infect new hosts at a staggering rate, it isn't long until the underworld they seek as refuge, when their numbers are smaller, has fallen completely into the cult's control. They also don't necessarily come out and state this, but it's very much implied that Genestealer cults thrive in underhives. They thrive in the lowest level of society, the level of society that is the furthest from Imperium scrutiny. And a lot of the information that we'll talk about, and I think we've covered this in the past, and when we covered the Eldar, we talked about this. A lot of the information, a lot of the lore that we introduce is always going to be from the Imperium's perspective, because the Imperium are the people doing the record keeping. 1, 2, we are, in air quotes, the people of the Imperium, because we're human. So that's how we're going to look at it. But the Genestealer threat, the Genestealer cult threat, I would say, and Marky, you probably have a little bit more expertise on this, but it's definitely presented as being a much bigger threat to humanity in the Imperium than to any of the other races that the Genestealers have infected, because they have infected other races.
So I got a little story for you. So I have, let's see, what do you think is I guess scary? It's a weird analogy. So I woke up one morning and I was hungry, and I went into my fridge and I was like, man, what is there to eat? And I guess my mom had bought some apples, and I was like, I could go for an apple right now. It's easy. I don't got to prepare it. It's ready to go. So I wash the apple off, and I noticed that as I'm holding it, it's a little soft. I was like, that's a little weird. Like, why is that soft? And I kind of pushed my thumb. Well, as I push my thumb dives into the apple, and a bunch of old rotted apples spurts all over my face. And that's kind of what the Genestealer Cult are.
Yeah.
You can't tell, and that's a true story, by the way. So I'm scarred for life.
I've
Fucking
never
apples, man.
once looked at an apple and been like, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat an apple. I don't know.
Well, when there's nothing else in the fridge,
fridge,
when there's like a what do you call it, like slices of cheese and some old milk and some apples, I think the apple was the best choice.
yeah, no, I mean, even then I would still be like, okay.
I'll just
I mean,
starve.
there's an apple, like, I've never looked at it and been like, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat an apple. Like that's never been there.
No. When I looked inside my fridge, that's all that was there. That's why I was like, I'll just have an apple.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense.
It wasn't like I woke up and I was like, I'm going to have an apple today.
I'm going to have an apple because I'm hungry. I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
No, I walked and looked into my fridge, and there was an apple, some slices of cheese, and some milk, and I was like, apple it is.
Yeah, I probably still would have taken the cheese over the
some slices of plastic.
Yeah. I was like, probably would have done that.
So yeah, so it's obviously a little bit of a long-winded version of what the Genestealer Cult are, but they rot the Imperium from the core. It's not a visual or a very clear visual threat.
Yeah, you
something that
have,
is
go ahead.
Go.
So you don't have word bearers or not word bearers, world eaters screaming down in like fucking drop pods coming out and slaughtering things and going, we need to deal with this
enemy
now. Yeah, it's much more we should have dealt with this way back then.
Yeah, and even then, like you can't really. You'd have to be lucky in order to stop a Genestealer Cult from starting on a planet at the very start of it, when it is the most efficient to take them out, of course, because they're small in number, and if you take out the Patriarch, then you're solid, right? Well, I mean, first of all, you have to find a Patriarch on a planet of trillions of people. It's gonna be a little rough. So a lot of this stuff just kind of goes undetected, and by the time you realize, your thumb goes inside of an apple and it's too late.
Yep.
And
a lot like that, because that rot's all connected, right? Like that's and that's the same thing. No matter how big the cult has, no matter how far that rot has spread, no matter what specializations, mutations, maybe even other tyrannids that have ended up on the planet, or other, whatever you want to say, other molds that have grown in that apple, it's all still connected to that rot. And that's what this is. Every single member of the cult has pure loyalty and allegiance owned by the Patriarch. The Patriarch controls all of them.
Yeah, and I mean, think about like a normal human, right? A normal human that has a lot of faith in the Emperor. Think of that, but instead of the Emperor, it's the Patriarch and the coming Tyranid threat that will eventually get there, most likely eventually get there, right? They think that they're the good guys, right? They pass it on. It's just a religion to them. It's just a way of it's just a belief. Unless the Patriarch specifically wants something done, they're living their day-to-day life with their families. Everything is normal to them. That's kind of where a lot of the brainwashing comes in. It's like when you have that baby and it's a little alien. It's a to them it's like a thing. It's a beautiful thing because it's like being born in and looking like the emperor essentially, right? So like if you had a baby and it looked like Sanguinius or it looked like the emperor, you'd be like, oh my god, it's a beautiful child. Same idea.
Right.
It's got a little extra leg, a little extra arm.
Hey,
Fine.
just makes them a little more efficient. It's fine.
Yeah.
So to give you guys a visual, a patriarch is twice the height of a space marine, and it has the strength to mince an armored Ongren into bloody chunks. They are truly nightmarish mutations of the original Genestealer bioform. With its enhanced strength and diamond-sharp claws, a patriarch can shred through platoons of heavily armored troopers and even destroy light vehicles. With the broodmine swaying potentially millions to its will, it's even more dangerous. In fact, the Imperium, specifically the Death Guard, not the Death Guard, not the Death Dealers, the Death Watch.
I was like, the Death Watch?
Too many fucking things with death.
Yeah.
The Death Watch has deemed the threat of the Patriarch as one of the greatest of any single Tyrannid creature. And they even have their own Xenocode threat designation. So a lot of times, or most of the time, like the Eldar have a threat designation. You might have an Eldar hero or an Eldar Exarch that has their own code threat designation, but in general, they're like, oh yeah, that's all the Eldar. The Tyrannids have a couple, like the Death Watch, call out the Swarm Lord and a couple of other things. But in this particular case, the Patriarch alone is a big enough threat that he gets his own.
Yeah, you don't want to fuck with him.
So,
Well, yeah, he's massive too.
Yeah, they're huge. As soon as a Genestealer, any Genestealer, is cut off from the influence of a hive mind, changes happen throughout their body and mind, influencing them to grow more independent from the pack that they once hunted with, and driving them towards seeking out isolated host planets. As we mentioned last episode, at this stage, they normally work independently, lurking in the shadows as they seek out a population to infect. But an organism that separates like this is going to be most successful when there are a maximized amount of chances for this to happen. So if we're talking about like a virus or something, viruses spread because even though a single virus agent, a virus vector, works alone, they are successful because there's, you sneeze and there's hundreds of thousands of virus particles that are coming out. There's a mosquito is a singular threat, but mosquitoes are a problem because there's thousands of them when you walk into your backyard, sort of idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you ever seen One Punch Man? It's like one mosquito is just kind of an annoyance, but a whole lot of mosquitoes
It's a problem,
suck
man.
the juices right out.
Yeah. So this is exactly what that singular Genestealer is attempting to do. There's that a singular Genestealer is attempting to establish itself on a planet, but the way that the Tyrannids are trying to have this happen is they send like 1,000 Genestealers out. And in this particular case, 1,000 of them might land on the same planet. This is one of the reasons why Genestealers that are cut off might end up with no option but to be stuck on a Space Hulk, reforming into their past packs. Another reason is that a Genestealer that became a Patriarch on a Space Hulk, and due to kind of how Space Hulks drift endlessly through the warp, popping out every once in a while, entangling something else, that Genestealer population, that Patriarch, they're just going to continue to go after what prey they can find. And it just feeds that cult, but it feeds that cult in isolation. And because it's feeding that cult in isolation, eventually everything in that cult just becomes a massive brood of Genestealers. You're not going to have a lot of reasons for a third generation Kellermorph or a fourth generation Magus when there's no population to control or wow. There's no reason for that. So they're just going to immediately go to, okay, fourth generation people just produce Genestealers.
Yeah, there's no political climate, so there's no reason to try and create these, political these Genestealers that control, political situations. What's the point of that when there's no economy on a Space Hulk?
Right. Yeah. When a Space Hulk pops out, crashes into an Imperial like bulk liner, and that bulk liner has 100,000 people on it. That 100,000 people is probably going to be dealt with by the Genestealer Kiss from the Patriarch, the Aberrants, and the Genestealers fast enough that there's going to be no reason for multiple generations. They're just going to Okay, make a bunch more gene. We just need more Genestealers.
Yeah, that'll just
and
be
then we're
one
gonna eat
generation
you.
all at once.
Yeah, I believe I haven't read the book personally, but I think it's like one of the Necron books, the Something in the Divine. One of the other one of our
Infinite in the Divine. Good book. Good book.
I believe it was that one where the Twisted Helix Genestealer Cult essentially infected the water of a planet with the Genestealer Cult DNA.
Yep.
So that way the entire populace is essentially infected by this.
Yep.
Pretty gnarly.
Yeah, and that's yeah, stuff like that happens. So once the first infection is made to a given population, generally speaking, a hive city or a planet with a smaller population, obviously hive planets fall to this too, but usually it starts with one city. It's not the entire planet. It's not the entire planet happening at once. The Genestealer that makes that first connection, as we mentioned, that's the one that becomes the Patriarch. So this triggers even more changes in the bioform. Another set of evolutions in its life cycle. Their bodies grow in size, their claws lengthen into sabers, their minds expand and begin to fill with potent psychic and telepathic energies, not all of which are just used to bind their fledgling cult to their will. They have a bunch of psychic powers that they can use as well. While at first their powers are smaller, and they're only able to stun or momentarily enthrall a victim, eventually a Patriarch is able to hypnotize you with a quick glance. So at the beginning, they've got to ambush you and they've got to stare into your eyes to stop you from struggling. Later on, you wander into their hall.
My eyes.
Yeah, and it's done. This works because their gaze...
Straight up Dracula.
Yeah, because their gaze shows a small fraction of the hive mind staring back at the person they're looking at. Once subjected to this terrible power, even in its diminished scale, most minds simply just give in and are willingly part of the inevitability of the Tyranid threat. They see, you jump on a manufactorum worker, or a manufactorum worker takes the wrong turn and sees the Patriarch. Patriarch looks at him and the guy just goes, "Oh, well, we're fucked. I just
shit my pants." Reminds me a lot, actually, of Pacific Rim. How the scientists looked into the the hive mind.
That's a good point.
They drifted. Yeah, they drifted with it.
Yeah, they drifted with the hive mind. The hive mind essentially just gained all the knowledge that that scientist had, and the scientist was all about it, all about trying to get to him. So it seems similar to that.
100%. So those that are not so enthralled become little more than raving lunatics and doomsayers that are actually pretty pervasive across imperial culture. So, the dude on the side, any movie about the end of the world, there's always a guy with the big cardboard sign, "The end is nigh." Some of these guys, they don't become enthralled, their minds just break, and then the Patriarch has no use for them. Your mind's broken, I'm going to let you go. And you're going to go out and sow confusion. Your use is no longer in how I can control you. Your use is in the fact that nobody can control you.
Chaos.
Those that are able to resist the fate normally don't survive the physical attack of the Patriarch when they attempt to physically resist, or when they run or even attack the Patriarch.
Space Marines, for example, have extremely strong willpower and are not easily taken by the Patriarch and his gaze.
But the Patriarch also has two very, very effective can openers for Space Marine armor.
Yeah. So, even though you can deny his sexual gaze, you can't deny his long
saber
ovipositor.
As a Patriarch becomes powerful enough, the psychic shadow around them will eventually thicken and coalesce into familiars. I found this really interesting. So the psychic power actually creates a dense fog, and it's that fog in their layers that the familiars just kind of generate out of. So these diminutive creatures look like small Genestealers and are an extension of the Patriarch, much like an extra arm. But they are extremely useful, able to sneak into small places, and act as extremely good spies. So the interesting thing about the familiar is, so in the Patriarch's lair, there is a gene pool, right? Is that, I don't know if that's the right name for it.
There's gene pool is in
there's physically a pool full of genetic soup. It's like
like a resin pit.
Yeah,
for your 3D printer.
Yes,
but it's DNA.
And the Patriarch can go and submerge himself in it. And when he submerges himself in it, he can puppet his familiars, or he can see all of the things that they saw.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I've never heard that at all.
I knew about the gene pool, yeah, but I
Yeah,
had
they-
no idea that
They
you
grow
can
like weapons and swords and shit in the gene pool too, which is really creepy and neat. It's dope.
that is so crazy. So you can like what's it called? Not superimpose. Astro project himself into something
Into his familiars,
something
yeah.
else. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
By laying in the gene pool, which I thought was super interesting. The other
Yeah.
thing that the Patriarch's familiars are really good at is they're good at acting as like psychic buoys. So they can extend his psychic control against other things. So the Patriarch has an instantaneous psychic connection to everything in the cult. But say the Patriarch is fighting against like a group of Inquisitors, he may lose range. You know, a very, very powerful psyker in the Inquisition may have a greater range than the Patriarch. Well, the Patriarch can make up for that by sending a familiar to be halfway between him and the Inquisitor, and then his range is doubled because of the familiar.
So he's like a repeater almost, like a router
Yes.
repeater.
Yeah. Maguses can also create familiars in a very, very similar way. We will get to Maguses here pretty soon. So Patriarchs look like massive Genestealers. Their upper arms now extended into these massive claws, each the size of swords that are serrated and diamond sharp. Their heads have enlarged, elongated, with their leathery skin taking on almost a brain-like texture. The carapace crest on their heads is also elongated. They often grow spines or spikes out of their carapace, their exoskeleton carapace. This is just one of the things that marks them out as being different from Broodlords. That Broodlords' heads don't get big like this. Their lower limbs become larger, but more dexterous. No longer are they kind of brutish parodies of finer dexterity. They actually are a little bit more capable at like manipulating human technology. Now he can type. Their legs and clawed feet are longer and more deadly as well. Their exoskeletons thicken. They grow spines, razor sharp edges, and a lot of this just depends on the environment they find themselves in. You really have a lot of freedom when you're modeling them, when you're coming up with your own to kind of do what you want, because a lot of what you keep coming back to with Genestealer Cult lore is that they take on whatever their host planet or their host species, their host society likes or acts like. Most notably, however, the one thing that truly marks them out as being incredibly different from Broodlords at a quick glance is their tail. It is no longer the tail stub of most Genestealers. It is now a long, whipping, spiked, and toxic weapon, much like that of other larger Tyranid bioforms. Think of Molochs and stuff like that. They also have that whip-like blade tail.
Yeah, a little stinger.
Slashing tail.
Yep. So in contrast, Broodlords are designed to act much more like field commanders, where a Patriarch is much more like a general or a ruler of a planet. So a Patriarch is stronger, and they have much more formidable, or much like a Patriarch, they are stronger and they have much more formidable claws, but they lack the expanded psychic power and brain power of a Patriarch. A Broodlord only gets 1 or 2 psychic abilities on top of being able to communicate with like 20 Genestealers. That's another big thing. A Broodlord only can control or only connects with about 20 other entities, not millions. They also lack a tail. Although, as they are still part of the Hive fleet, they can, however, benefit from a lot of the genetic and biomechanical tools at the disposal of the Hive mind. So a Patriarch can't be like pulled back into a gene birthing tank and be given bioweapons like a shredder or cannon or whatever. A Broodlord, in theory, could. On tabletop, you're never going to see it, but in lore terms, they can be given a lot of the biomechanical weapons that the Tyranids enjoy in general. So we've mentioned the brood mind a couple of times, and I want to take a minute to discuss the difference between, very, very briefly, the difference between the hive mind and the brood mind. The hive mind is a gestalt collective consciousness of the Tyranid species. This means that the hive mind isn't a specific creature or entity. It's simply a theorized organization of the entire race, which is then perceived as much more than the sum of its parts. So Gestalt is a philosophical concept that means several different things can share a consciousness. A really interesting way, a really quick way to look at this is like computer networks. And I'll get more into that in a minute. But one computer on a network only has so much processing power. But if you make like a server farm, you can expand your processing power because you're using processing from all the computers on the network. That's kind of the idea of like a hive mind a little bit. This can be a really odd concept for us to understand, as Tyranids also operate on the field of battle with special bioforms called synapse creatures, which enforce the will of the hive mind, which makes it sound like there is a single creature somewhere doing all of this. However, if a splinter fleet or hive fleet gets far enough away from the whole, it can become another hive fleet entirely. And this, mixed with the fact that we have cases in lore of hive fleets attacking and eating lesser hive fleets, it suggests that given enough time and distance, disparate versions or instances of a hive mind may no longer be in cohesion with one another, and therefore the stronger one is going to attempt to consume the lesser one.
So it's like the hive.
It's easiest.
I was going to say the hive mind is like the internet, where a brood mind would be like a LAN party.
Essentially, that's exactly. It's really funny. That's almost exactly the same analogy I made.
That you were
I'm making.
yeah, I was going to say that.
So, it's easiest to look at it as like a critical mass situation. When enough Tyranids are in one place, they generate a hive mind. Or, as Marky just mentioned, the internet. Enough Tyranids in one place generate an internet. That's like a quick way to look at the hive mind. To Genestealers and Genestealer cults, they have something called the brood mind, and it's much more specifically and functionally important. A brood mind is smaller and more localized than the hive mind. To use Marky's analogy, it's more like a LAN party or more like a local area network that can be attached to the internet, but is also capable of independent processing from that wider network. Brood minds are created specifically for Genestealers to form an interlocking telepathic network. So whether or not it's a Genestealer, pure strain Genestealers under a brood lord, or if it's Genestealer cultists under a patriarch, it's the same concept. This allows them to operate as vanguards, infiltration forces, and of course, Genestealer cults. A brood mind also functions as a beacon to locate a sufficiently infected world for consumption of biomass by the hive fleet of Tyranids. Once a hive fleet is within a few hundred light years of a sufficiently developed Genestealer cult, this function of the brood mind will be automatically jump-started, regardless of where the patriarch is in its plans. If the fleet comes close enough, it doesn't matter. The beacon will turn on, and the patriarch will immediately start the cycle. However, a patriarch can also activate the beacon. In this case, the signal is just broadcast on a loop until a hive fleet is within range to detect it. So either a hive fleet gets close enough that the beacon turns on, or the patriarch's plans reach to a point of fruition where he starts it. In either case, a beacon goes out, a nearby hive fleet sees it, and they come to eat it.
Yeah,
in general,
kind of like how everybody jokes around about like them. They're the dinner bell ringers.
100%, man. They're calling everybody to the buffet.
Yeah.
In general, while a patriarch can start the revolution at any time it chooses, it is often this beacon that is activated that causes the uprising to be triggered. And that's why in lore, and in some cases, the Genestealer cult becomes active and is just not in a position to take the planet. And that's because, like, they're just not close. The Tyranids showed up before the patriarch could reach whatever it needed.
Yeah, takes time. Like, it's literally generations and generations of people being born.
You can't make an omelet unless you break some eggs, right? Break a lot of eggs. The brood mind also acts to be a telepathically linked network of all the infected on a planet that has a population of Genestealer cultists. It drives the fanatical religion of the cultists, as well as acting to greatly increase the cultists' ability to communicate and coordinate. As we mentioned already, this force acts to make every infected or naturally born cultist the absolute loyal member of the patriarch's brood. So because they've got this telepathic network and link, like that joke of like, all right, guys, let's synchronize our watches. Genestealer cultists don't need to do that. They could be on you could have two forces on opposite sides of the planet strike at the exact same time because they're telepathically linked. And they basically go, all right, let's go. Let's fucking hit these communication centers. And that's why they're so dangerous when
It's
they do
fucking Irene.
when they do become active is they'll take out like power plants, and you know, it'd be like losing all of your power plants, all of your telecommunications networks and satellites, and all of your military bases in like a 4-hour period.
Yeah, I mean, one of the I want to say it was Art of War. Like communication in war is like one of the key things that you need in order to be successful. And one of the things that Genestealer Cult have are perfect communication. Like calm is always down is like a significant saying, I want to say, in the military. And so think of having perfect calm and being like a really an extremely strong like guerrilla fighting military like organization. It's gnarly. It's crazy how well organized and how well communicated they are.
Yeah. You know, and something really interesting to say on it too is like when a lot of people hear about Genestealer cults and stuff, they're always like, well, how do you know, like they are physically different, you know, or there's a lot of them that kind of look, you know, they all start to like kind of look alike, you know. One of the things is like the planets that they're on and infesting, you know, where these cults are like uprising. Nobody's dealt with them, you know, like nobody's seen them before. They don't know what they are. Like we could look at it and be like, oh, that's a Genestealer cult, but like a person on that planet, like that's literally an alien. They've never seen.
Yeah, most people don't even know what Tyranids are.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like the grandeur of these galaxies and stuff. Like this isn't something that is like the reason why they're so good at like rising and populating and things like
Infiltration.
that. Infiltration. You know, one of the things like how are you supposed to know that there's this thing that's these are getting into the city and getting into people and infecting people. You know, it's invasion of the body snatchers. Like people don't know what they are. You know what I mean? So that's why you combine all of that together, and that's what makes them so effective.
And a lot of what that breaks down to as well is like the communication thing. The comms are always down, and the idea that Beast just brought up in imperial systems and imperial planets. There's the way that the dating system, the Imperium is designed is there's the first clause, the first prefix is literally how far away from the person you're communicating are you. So if you're 9 or 10 astropathic jumps out, by the time that message gets to you, what you're getting is, uprising on Thracian Primaris of miners in the working class. And then like whoever's reading that isn't going, oh, Genestealers. They're going, oh, well, that's awful. Like they shouldn't have let them unionize those dumb bastards. Like that's what happens in a bureaucratically bloated government that is the Imperium. Like no one's thinking to put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, they don't know.
Yeah, they're so cool, man. They are so fucking cool. It's so hard not to be like, I want to start a Genestealer cult army tonight.
Do it, dude. I just love it. Like it's like almost like a, I'm trying to like think of a good example, but it's almost like an underdog that is extremely powerful. Like it's like a sneaky Imperial Guard. Like everybody, I don't know about everybody, but most people like Imperial Guard. Exactly. Like most people like Imperial Guard because like it's relatable, but it's a military organization where this is like freedom fighters that are like super stealthy and like it's just a cool, like they have a lot of flavor to them.
And they play into that too, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a look at roles inside the cult itself. So last episode, we very briefly touched on the specialized roles that those born to the 3rd and 4th generation of Genestealers might fill. There's actually only one 3rd generation role, but it's important, and we are going to talk about it. These are leadership roles in the cult and its military organization, but also often act in leadership roles throughout the host's society. There are a couple of exceptions to this, but again, we'll get there. A lot of times this is done in order to further the patriarch's goals of conquering and spreading its infection into the entire population. So these specialized roles are coming out to further the cause. These roles play a huge part in the cult's culture and organization, as well as their useful roles during the revolutions and insurrections that will eventually burn a planet to its core. Going back to that apple analogy right there, man. Just squishing out all that guts from its core.
Yep, just PTSD of fucking rotten apples, man.
Now you play Genestealer Cult. I see what happened.
Yeah. I don't squeeze apples anymore. Now I just let it ride. I just bite into it.
just see what happens.
Yeah.
Suck it down, mush and all.
Yeah, fuck it.
This one tastes like applesauce.
Oh God, dude, it got all over my face. Like I was just like, oh, that's
people
not
pay
right.
good money for that in other countries. That's all I'm saying.
I was gonna say usually that's that's how you know you made a good choice.
Yeah, apple just like bukkake all over my face, dude.
Is that like rotten a number
apple.
3? So as we talk about these independent roles, it's important to remember that just as the patriarch is an extension of the hive mind's will, each of these roles is an extension of the patriarch. So the patriarch is doing all of this independently, but the patriarch was sent to do this by the hive mind. And the patriarch's life cycle is to create all of this, ring the dinner bell, and then pretty much everybody except the patriarch and the pure strain Genestealers at the top are going to be consumed when the Tyranids arrive. And in most cases, the patriarch as well. That patriarch has served its purpose, and it either dies in that war or it willingly gives itself, or it doesn't willingly. Its function is to give itself to the hive mind, and then the hive mind ingests all of its experiences and spreads it to the collective. But those pure strain Genestealers that have been born to this 4th generation, they're prepared by a lot of these specialized roles to go out as soon as the planet falls, to go out and infect the next planet. Excuse me, to go out and infect the next planet. So the only things that are escaping the Great Devourer are the things that are specifically going to find the next meal ticket. And
the circle of life.
What's that dark place over there? Oh, that's the Genestealer Cult. We don't go over there. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Magus. The Magus is the cult's foremost connection to the host society's aristocracy, government, and other institutions. Maguses are extremely psychically gifted and possess supernatural charisma, allowing them to manipulate their host society with ease as they work to spread the infection. Their control of hybrids in their direct vicinity is total, and they often have a psychic ability to force even the uninfected to bow to their will. So these are just really powerful psychers.
Yeah, it's in their name. Magus. Mage.
Right. A Magus uses spycraft, diplomacy, and honeyed words to bend dynasties of a world to their will. And if that tactic fails, they can always use their psychic abilities to bring the uninfected to their will anyway. So they'll try diplomacy, they'll try tactics. They want to do the super spy version. But if push comes to shove, they will just go into your brain and fucking delete the inside of your head and take control of you.
Yeah, they're meant to play chess, and when you don't want to play chess with them, they pull out a gun and they tell you you're going to play anyway.
They hit you with the chessboard. I like that they pull out a gun and you're playing anyway. From here, it's easier to infect even more of the population or just use the noble houses as pawns to start civil unrest or stir up old rivalries. So it's not always in the patriarch's best interest to bring you to his side. Sometimes it's in the patriarch's best interests to make you use all of your household forces to destroy all of that guy's household forces, because then the patriarch has 2 less armies that he has to deal with. A Magus is usually born to a partnership that involves at least one warp-touched parent. It always does. I don't know why I put at least. A Magus is always born to a partnership that involves at least a single warp-touched parent, but both might be. They're tall and statuesque, possessing an almost exotic allure. They easily pass as humans, and they have a commanding presence even over those who are uninfected. So, Beast, you had mentioned this. I think a lot of the reasons that the artwork and the models depict the Genestealers the way they do is because this is after the revolution has started. There's no reason for pretenses anymore. I think, like, before the shit hits the fan, like a Magus is just like a super hot chick or a super suave dude who just looks normal. I don't think they're bald. I don't think they've got the head crest yet. I think they're just normal ass, attractive looking humans, because that's how the 4th generation is described. But I think I'm extrapolating and guessing here, but I think as soon as the revolution starts, they shed whatever that is and very much become identifiable as Genestealer.
Well,
the
I mean,
revolution is on, comrade. Don your red robes.
I think
Take
they
down
probably.
the Terrorits.
I think they probably. I mean, I think they probably look like it the whole time, but they have so many people able to do things for them. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Or
Like
they
they're not.
They wear like a wig or whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe not even that, but like if these ones are also psychically powerful, so like the people are so caught up. Anybody that's like a normal person is so caught up in that, like they're not noticing these things. You know what I mean? Like, and also too, they might just be like, oh, like I mean, you see a bald person walking down the street, you don't really think that they're an alien.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you don't know what you know,
yeah.
so.
And shit,
So-
I mean, again, with the way that the artwork's done and with the argument you just made, there's plenty of bald people that I'm like, damn, she's hot, or damn,
Yeah.
that person looks good.
well,
or,
but I
"Damn,
mean, if
that
you
guy
look at
looks good."
if you look at under hives and you look at hive gangs and stuff like that, like everybody's got crazy hair.
Mhm,
Everybody
mhm.
there is no norm. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
so
this
I don't
doesn't
think they
necessarily
even.
stand out as weird until, like, start waving the funny-looking dagger around, things like that.
Right. What were you gonna say, Marky?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think you're for the most part right, Ryan. They hide it, but I don't think it's like a top priority for them unless it's actually like extremely noticeable. I mean, obviously
Right.
you don't want one of the highest ranking political individuals looking like, they got a fat raisin on their forehead.
Right.
So maybe they do hide it with like a bandana or a wig or a mask or, just,
Like a
not
crown
every
or
planet.
something.
Yeah, exactly. Not every planet, it has perfectly breathable air. Maybe they're wearing masks. Maybe, everybody on the planet is bald and they're okay to walk around with their bald ass, little raisin hanging out. I think it's all situation dictates, but I don't think it's, I think you're right. Like they don their, their Genestealer cult. Like it's also, how do I put it? They do what they want,
Right.
I don't think it's
There's a certain amount of cavalierism when it comes to the Genestealer cults. They operate as quietly as they need to, but as flamboyantly as they can.
Yep.
So a Magus also acts to lead the cult as a mystical and from a mystical and religious aspect. Speaking of the patriarch as a lord and savior, they also act as a mastermind as the cult spreads across the entire planet or even off it to other planets. Their gaze is just as potent as the patriarchs, and as they grow in power, they can generate their own familiars. Normally, only one Magus exists for each gene sect. We'll get into gene sects a little bit later, probably next episode. Maguses of other gene sects, however, will, while still enthralled to the will of the patriarch, will often compete amongst themselves, believing that their gene sire favors one of them as the high prophet. And this was like teased at, but reading in between the lines, I think the patriarch does this on purpose. The patriarch allows them to operate in this competing like scheme because it furthers his goals. If they're going to compete with each other to spread his shit faster, he's winning, because they're competing. Like everything is still benefiting him.
So one thing that I just thought of, like how we were just a second ago, you were talking about how they operate out in the open as much as they can, but will be secretive. It specifically reminded me of it. There's a scene in The Expanse where like it is a detective and he goes down to the docks, and the docks are all run by the like criminal terrorist organization, and they all have a neck tattoo, and he's like, wow, you guys just like wear your colors openly down here. And it's because the entire dock is run by that gang,
Right. There's no reason
organization.
to hide.
There's no reason to hide. But if they go into the nicer sections of the space station, they cover them up and things like that. Like half the cops, end up working for those guys, but you can't tell because they cover their neck.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and like another thing is like obviously the army has to look different than other people's armies on the tabletop. So there's that whole make them look a little special, make them look a little different.
I think there's a
that
lot
whole
of that.
hero scale thing goes that direction as well, where they have to make armies look different.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, especially in like them we're having like the emblems and stuff like that, the like little hanging things, and I definitely like carrying off crazy big sword. Like, I think that's definitely a big chunk of that. But like, even in that aspect, like you got to think like these worlds are so crazy that I mean, look, imagine a Total Recall. You know what I mean? Like when you watch Total Recall, like how many people, there's all sorts of crazy mutated people, and it's not really a big deal. You know what I mean? Like they know
it's just the social norm.
Yeah, like it's become a thing, so like it's not something that's looked at like, they're Tyranids, like they're just like, there's those bald people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in like, was it Eisenhart or Ravener? I think it was Ravener. There's a specific area of the slums where the mutants live. And everybody knows. Yeah, that's the one. And just everybody knows that's where the mutants live, and normal people just don't go there. So it just is what it is.
And we talked about that when we were covering I think it's the second generation Tyranid, the second generation Genestealers last episode. They find jobs in like these deplorable industrial conditions where the fact that they've got extra arms and they look kind of weird is people don't really care because, well, he's standing next to an iron smelter and he's tipping it over with his bare hands. I don't have to buy that guy special equipment. He can just do it. I don't care. I'm going to pay him as long as the tax, when the tax collectors come by, I'm going to pay him off. And if they do an inspection, I'm going to tell that guy to wear a cloak.
I was going to say, it's funny. I was having a conversation with my buddies today, and they were talking about how when like OSHA shows up to a job site, usually they'll just kind of stop everybody from what they're doing and like send them all on lunch until OSHA does their, inspection. Because when they're doing their inspection, any little thing can be a fine. Any little thing can be, an infraction. So they're like, might as well mitigate anything that can happen by just taking it away and then letting them do their thing. So as long as the job gets done, right? You get the job done. I don't care how.
Yeah. And that's the Imperium. And in a lot of ways, the Imperium, being what it is, they don't care either. They just want their iron. If you're meeting their iron quota, they ain't going to inspect you.
Yeah.
So the next bioform that we're going to talk about, the next specialization that we're going to talk about is the Primus. These are the cult's generals, and they excel at the guerrilla ambush tactics that Genestealer cults have become known for. While a cult still remains in hiding, a Primus acts to establish weapon and vehicle stockpiles and even extend the cult's influence to other planets. In some cases, a Primus can even bend a spacecraft or an entire fleet to the Patriarch's cause. A Primus only emerges when a Genestealer cult either hits a critical mass where the cult has sufficient influence of numbers to begin to take a world, or when a Hive fleet is detected at the edge of the beacon's range. So a Primus is also, just like the Patriarch, is one of those things that can become active because the Hive fleet is near enough, not because the Patriarch's ready. While being born to the fourth generation of the cult, a Primus is larger and stronger than others of its own host form. They are advantageous. They also have a tendency to maintain advantageous warrior traits like thicker skin, enhanced muscles, and extra arms. These are usually a pretty good indication that that's a Primus, although they do possess a straight-backed and upright stature. So they've got a lot more looks of the earlier generations, as far as like the muscles and all of that, the extra arms go, but they don't have that hunched forward. They don't look hunched back. They don't look twisted.
Yeah, they're a militaristic, branch of the Genestealer cult, so they're given these, warrior traits essentially.
Yeah.
They're
So
not
where
meant for, infiltration of,
Yeah.
specific things like a mage's.
Yeah. So while a magus is the pinnacle of mental and psychic ability, the primus is the pinnacle of the warrior form. A primus has access to the best war gear, although this gear is designed for stealth and ambush missions. They actually, I found this fucking fascinating as shit. They actually mix toxins from their own bloodstream to fire from their own specially crafted needle guns. And some even wield strange sentient swords that are grown by the patriarch themselves in the patriarch's gene pool. Both of those things, I was like,
That's
wait,
dope.
they make toxins in their own blood? That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And when I was saying infiltration, I meant more like infiltration into like, the political aspect of the Imperium, not infiltration like, let's go infiltrate this base and kill these people. That's obviously different.
Yeah. So when a patriarch's instinct shifts back from survival and infection to the aggressive stance of its original Genestealer mindset, the primuses of a gene sect will engage in a master plan of underground and covert attacks, spreading chaos and terror across a hive or a planet's population. As the regions descend into open warfare, then they will take to the front lines to lead the battle and civil conflicts that swallow whole worlds. So they very much act like terrorist cell leaders until the fighting has started, and then they're the general. So the next one is the Kalmavos. This is the cults. Clamavis?
Yeah, Clamavis.
Okay. This is the cult's spreader of truth, where a Magnus targets the noble, rich, the Kalmavos. Clamavis.
Magus,
not com.
Magus,
Not
Magus.
clam. It's clam, not com. Got it.
Yeah, Clamavis.
The Clamavis appeals to the common people, spreading disinformation and audio viruses throughout planetary Vox networks.
Yeah, kind of like a hacker. He's like a big, like what do you call him? Like he's a dude that what do you call him? Like in D&D, he's like the guy that stands up on the big old soapbox and he's just like yelling at people like, yeah, the revolution is here. Like,
yeah, that's exactly what they are. Like you're like a bard, a shouter, town crier.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. A crier. That's it.
Normally, it's like you were calling them earlier, the doomsayers. The guy, the end is nigh. All that.
Yeah. So they're, as Marky just mentioned, they're also born of the 4th generation. They're inherently good at hacking into Vox and comms networks. And they are also born with a potent psychic ability. But unlike the Magus, theirs is more akin to the Shadow and the Warp. They spread a nullifying effect via their transmissions. In fact, the closer you are to this effect, the better chance it has to actually liquefy your brain and burst your internal blood vessels, even reducing Tau pilots inside their battle suits and Space Marine Primaris's heads to jelly inside their suits.
It's funny that you say it like that because it's we don't talk about the tabletop much, but on the tabletop, it's not that powerful.
It is in lore, Marky.
It is in the lore, but it's like what do you call it? Like D cannons or D size?
Yeah.
What's that, Kev?
I said, can it cast smite? Because if it can, then
it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
So a Clamavis is a disinformation and propaganda master, using their talents to convert the uninfected to the cult, disrupting enemy transmissions and spreading fear throughout a given population. It's the dude in Saving Private Ryan that's like,
I was
the
just thinking
Statue
that.
of Liberty.
I was literally
kaput."
Dusseldorf. That's his name. Our friendly neighborhood morale officer.
It's totally that guy.
Oh my God. The second you said that, I was like, the Statue of Liberty is kaput. And then you're all, Save Private Ryan.
So these are the mouthpieces of the Patriarch, and their words are the closest thing the Patriarch has to directly speaking to its followers, both those infected and just those who are converted. So that's actually kind of an interesting point that we haven't brought up yet. There are people who fall to the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor who are not infected. They're just like, oh, this religion makes more sense than the Imperial cult.
Yeah, or they're tricked into thinking that it's the same thing.
Yep. So the Locust is the next one. The Locust is a silent and patient bodyguard, acting as sentinels of protection for the magus of their gene sex. These are fucking badass.
Yeah, they're pretty dope. They're like little hitmen, essentially, like hitman's bodyguard type dudes. They are.
Yeah.
They're like all shrouded in mystery and shit. They look like delicate old men, but then like they have like this. I don't know. You probably
They're like they're like monks, in a kung fu movie. They're there in their hood
like
and they're not moving, and then they just burst into like extremely violent action.
The blind guy in Rogue One.
Yes,
I'm one with the force with me.
Donnie
and then he just like walks out into the middle of the street and just murks on a bunch of I mean, he plays a really good version of that character in basically everything he's in. But that is a very he's got the robe. He looks all unassuming. He looks like a blind dude.
Yep.
And then he just walks out with a stick and just murks like 7 dudes.
So
what is it? I'm one with the cult. The cult is with me.
The cult is one with me. A locust is inhumanly fast and agile. They move with the ferocity of a pure strain Genestealer and can match an Eldari Exarch in combat prowess. They use twin swords in combat. A locust can seem like a statue, unmoving for hours, not even blinking, as they watch and catalog everything happening around them. They often wear long robes that help them pass as unassuming figures while also hiding their extra limbs and a nasty and deadly tail that is tipped with that neurotoxin spine again. A locust carries a specially designed staff of office. This is crafted by a magus and a clamavus, and they send out a destabilizing frequency which upsets and disturbs the thoughts of those around them. A locust that is bound to a magus that has the staff of office is often in attendance to these meetings that a magus will take, and that tool is used to destabilize the negotiation in favor of the magus, making their opponent uneasy and unable to think or process information clearly. They can turn this up, though. So they can turn it on and it makes you a little uneasy. They can turn it up and it causes hallucinations, migraines, and can even cause unconsciousness in non-cultists.
What was that one movie that like it's like a gun that makes you throw up?
Oh,
Minority
movie
Report.
Or was it a skit?
Yeah, Minority Report. The 6 stick.
Was it Minority Report?
Yeah,
the 6 stick.
But then there's the gun in what's the name of it?
I was like,
was that Minority Report?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's the gun that makes you like it's the emotion gun. It makes you
the boy,
to whatever you shoot.
No, it was a Kick-Ass.
It
was Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass had the 6 stick.
Yeah,
same thing as Minority Report.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah,
makes you poop and throw up.
Yeah, Locust has the 6 stick.
Do you have one of these? I don't think I've ever seen it.
I do.
The Sanctus.
The Locust or whatever.
Locust is different. Yeah, he looks like an old frail. He looks like a frail old man. Yeah.
Have you ever used one? I don't think I've ever fought that.
No, they're not that great on the table. They're okay. Yeah.
The lore is often cooler than the tabletop.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like I said, it's like the what is it? The D cannons from Eldar.
Yeah, where they like molecularly destabilize the entire universe, but then like you use one and they're like 2d6.
Yeah, it's like 1 damage.
2d6, no AP. You're like, what the fuck? Like, don't describe this as like a universe-ending weapon and then not have it have an AP.
Yeah, it's the same thing as a bolter.
Yeah. So the next one is the Sanctus.
Sanctus. Yeah. Oh, I think that's plural, but it's Sanctus. Yeah.
Multiple Sanctuses. But yeah, the next is the Sanctus. So the Sanctus is essentially the other side of the Locust coin. So these are assassins, and they usually favor blades that are created by the Patriarch. They are employed when the option of diplomacy is either exhausted or the Patriarch is just bored and thinks it's a waste of time. They are singular, unlike most other cultists, and when they are not on the hunt, they often lurk around the Patriarch's throne, watching over their leader and ready to act in a split second to take out any threat. They
Yeah,
wield special. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Oh,
go
you
ahead.
might be getting to it. I was gonna say they have two different like gear outfits. Like so they have the
Yes. So they wield a special anthropomorphic blades. They wield special anthropomorphic blades, which are grown in the Genesis pool. That's what they're called, not gene pool.
Genesis pool. There you go.
pools
Yeah.
of the Patriarch. These are pools made from the liquefied psychic essence of slain cultists. I love that. I don't know if that means that they died and then they were collected, or if they're the Patriarch's like, bring 50 cultists to me. I need a Genesis pool. Like, I'm not sure which version it is.
It's still pretty sick. It's like a little
Either way,
mini,
it's cool.
what do you call it? Little mini bio acid vat that he can manipulate and mess with.
Yep.
Like a
So
mini
these
hive fleet,
blades-
essentially.
Yeah. That like a birthing pool.
Yeah.
These blades cause massive agony as the voices of millions of formless minds rip across the mental landscape of non-cultists who are struck with the weapon. Their secondary option, or their other option, I guess it's not really secondary because they can choose what they want to do, is the marksman needle rifle that fire toxic-laced needle rounds that are designed by the biophagus. So they can also use a long rifle. This is a bioengineered. These vials are bioengineered from pure strain Genestealer blood and can paralyze a victim in seconds. If the victim is psychic, a neurological overload can burn out the psyker's mind in a matter of seconds as it exposes them to the shadow of the warp, which I thought was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Are
These
they that
guys
badass?
they are gnarly on the tabletop, yes.
So Sanctuses have multi-jointed limbs and malleable muscle structures, allowing them to squeeze into places much smaller than they seem to be able to appear to be. Makes me think of octopus. They also have greatly enhanced olfactory senses, making them perfect trackers and bloodhounds. When a Patriarch sends them after a target, the Patriarch simply requires a single drop of blood of the victim. The Patriarch's familiars often accompany a Sanctus to act as the Primarch's eyes and ears. And this is the case where the Primarch will often submerge itself in the Genesis pool to like watch, because it wants to watch. You know, like the Primarch really doesn't like the system governor, and he sends his Sanctus after the system governor, and he's like, I want to watch.
He's like just chilling in the hot tub.
Yeah,
He's a
hot tub
he's-
time
he's a-
machine, but
he's a little
He's just
cuck.
chilling in the hot tub. Chilling in the hot tub, rubbing one out, you know, just
Yeah,
watching.
Patriarch's a little cuck, dude. He's just like,
oh wow,
he's like, yeah, dude, do it. I don't want to do it myself. You do
I want to watch you do it.
it.
So kelomorphs are bioforms created to specifically exploit the psychology of the lone gunslinger, outlaw, or freedom fighter. These
Actually, I think
cold-blooded
Kellermorphs are just assholes.
Yeah.
These cold-blooded
Shut the fuck
killers
up, Kevin.
exist. Yeah. These cold-blooded killers exist to either terrorize or embolden populations with their legendary exploits. So kelomorphs are a more recent refinement to the Genestealer cult. They've only been around for the last couple of cycles, essentially, and they actually come from the 3rd generation. Their senses and reflexes are heightened to an astonishing degree. Their eyesight, balance, and coordination have also been enhanced, all to turn them into devastating 3-armed gunfighters. If you've played anything, or if you're familiar with anything in the cyberpunk like world of games, these are street samurai. They have been fucking enhanced to just lightning reflex react to whatever the fuck is around them.
Yeah, or
It's
I think in go Tom.
They've created the character from Red Dead Redemption.
In a lot of
I was
ways,
gonna
yeah.
say it's Bill Burr in The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. They are crafted not only to be stunningly swift and masterful gunfighters, but to be the heroic face of the Genestealer Cults. So this comes back to something that you had just said about the appeal of playing Genestealer Cults. Like a lot of people like to play the way that you had summed it up. A lot of people like to play the guard because they want to be the like organized
The humans.
military,
Like organized
hero.
military that's relatable, yeah.
Right. And a lot of people who are drawn, like players who are drawn to Genestealer cults, are drawn to that like Wild West outlaw thing. The Keller
Yeah,
morph.
like freedom fighter type stuff.
Yeah. The Keller morph is designed to make populations think that. which I think is so fucking cool. So their legendary exploits become tales that spread the cult's influence while eroding the host society's control. Anarchs and outlaw heroes who inspire lower Hiver scum and upper spire dandies just the same. Kelomorphs yield custom Liberator auto snubs, firing bullets made from rarer elements, often made and smuggled out of the factories by the downtrodden and dejected who view them as heroes. Smuggling and making of these rounds will often kill the workers who risk it all to get their hero his preferred ammo. The Liberator auto snub is a snub revolver that is favored for Arbites, Lawkeepers, and legendary Hive gangers alike. They fire powerful armor-piercing rounds. In the case of the Kelomorph, and the reason that a lot of the people who steal this material and then make them their rounds die, is they are using even deadlier depleted Volanium rounds. Kelomorphs are physically the representation of the Star Children propaganda that is spun by the Clamavus when they are eroding society.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Robin Hood, I would almost say.
Yeah. They 100% made him into they came up with a bioform that is a like hero of the people.
Cult hero.
Yeah.
It's just such a fucking neat and like fucked up idea.
Right.
Yeah, I never really knew what he was for. Like, all I've ever been described, he's like, oh, he's like a gunslinger. And I'm like, what the hell's the point of that? Like, shouldn't they all be like that? But no, if you make him into a hero, like they did that on purpose.
He's an icon.
Like, that's actually, yeah, that's really good. He's a symbol. He's what
Yeah,
the city
he's a
needs,
symbol.
not what they want.
You either live long enough to be. All right. So next we're going to talk about the Nexos. So for those of you who are not in the know, we do a video version of the podcast. And in the video version of the podcast, you can see a lot of images that we bring up in relation to what we're talking about. And the reason I bring this up is before we jump into what the Nexus does and all of that, I want to point out what we're looking at right here. On the Nexus's table, on the Nexus planning table, do you guys know what this is a map of?
I do not. Like a Hive
this
city?
L-shaped building right here, if you go to Google Maps right now, is Forge World. And this long, big building right here, if you go to Google Maps right now, is Games Workshop headquarters.
Get the fuck out, dude. Really?
They fucking did it on purpose. Isn't that fucking
That's
cool?
right.
So cool. Holy shit.
It's a little Easter egg hidden inside it. So the Nexos is seeded from a small fraction of the is seeded with a small fraction of the Patriarch's cerebral might. This bioform is created to help the Patriarch with the massive task of coordinating a planet-wide siege or uprising with pinpoint microsecond accuracy. A Nexos can lay their hands on any creature carrying a trace of the Genestealer infection and immediately relive and recall all of its genetically stored memories, storing and compartmentalizing the staggering volume of information for use in the Patriarch's ever-evolving plan.
It's a lot easier than having to eat someone's brain matter.
Yeah, no shit, right? This, however, is incredibly taxing, and Nexos often look pallid, worn, and physically weakened, especially the more often they do it. However, they never complain and they never give up. While a Primus is a general leading their men from the front, the Nexos is a field marshal controlling hundreds of thousands from a strategic center of the Patriarch's back line, capable of analyzing, interrupting, and reacting to a staggering amount of battlefield logistics, able to shift the Patriarch's forces quickly to strike at vital weaknesses in order to assure victory. These guys are cool. The more I read about them,
The model is
I was
dope,
like,
too.
oh, these are dope. Yeah, the model looks good. The art.
I did not know that about the whole being able to read people's memories and stuff just by touching them.
They can't do it to non-infected. They can only do it to infected. But still,
okay.
It paints an interesting picture, especially from a creative writing standpoint, because you could have like a Kellermorph or a Saboteur or somebody who is on the front lines and is killed. And then that body's rushed back and the Nexos just reaches out and touches them and immediately gets all of the recon data that they got. It doesn't matter that they died. That data is still coming back.
I mean, it sucks that I don't know. I hate this guy. Like, he's the one that I make fun of the most because I'm like, like as far as models go. Like that's the thing with Genestealer Cult. Like the models, like there's so many different like one character models.
Yeah, it's just a
and
dude.
yeah, and I'm like, why the fuck are you putting a dude with a table? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna field my army. Don't forget about this guy with a table. Like, I'm gonna keep him in the background. Gotta have my coffee table.
I do kind of like that. It makes me think of I think the Geonosins in the second movie have like a table that they're carrying, or like a combat table that they're moving around.
The droid army has a table that projects.
So the droid, yeah, it's a projection table. And I like the idea of, I get what you're saying, but I like the idea of a projection table. It kind of would be cool to see it in other factions. Like, even if it was more
I see
like
a lot of
collectible
guard conversions for those.
Yeah. Guard,
like
it would make sense to have one. But like
the one that I
yeah,
see
no, I mean like
is they take a like a tank commander top, or just the top of like an officer torso, stick it on there and paint it up with a bunch of Tesseract glow to make it look like a green shimmery hologram.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's neat.
Instead of the top they've got on it now, and then they just have like a servitor on the base instead of the Genestealer, or they paint him up like an Imperial Navy or something, you know.
Oh,
And
yeah,
he's
that's a good
basically
idea.
carrying it on his back.
Yeah, he's basically commanding from a bunker somewhere, but his avatar on the field is, you know, a little hologram of the officer.
That's neat. But it is,
cool.
I do get what Beast is saying, because like, why would you have this dude on the battlefield?
Right, yeah, it just cracks me up. Like that's one of the, like, yeah, I say it more as a joke, but it's very much like, I'm like, oh, like whenever I've like fought Mark, like Mark brought out his whole army, I'm like, oh yeah, well, what's this guy, and why is there a dude with a table? Like,
you gotta play
you know
ping pong in
like,
the middle of the match, man.
yeah,
Come
I'm
on.
like, why is this dude bringing it's like, what, like, I don't understand. Like, can he fight? You know, like,
No.
He hits you with his table.
yeah, exactly. It's fucking useless.
So the last one we're going to talk about is the Biophagus. The Biophagus is a master of gene manipulation and bioalchemy, designing concoctions to spread the infection even further and faster. Often posed as an underhive medicae, their dread science can spread the genetic taint while treating a patient. So like, you come in, you know, you're a ganger and you got your fucking arm like chopped off in a gang fight, and this guy's like, oh yeah, I'll take care of you, and then he transfuses you with Genestealer blood, like Genestealer infected blood.
He's essentially like a Ripper Doc for Genestealer Cult.
Yep. So a Biophagus is not above experimenting on the host society's population, either through weird medical experimentation or through eugenics. This is very much everything horrible that happened during various World War II medical experimentations fall under the Biophagus. It was a Biophagus of the Twisted Helix who unlocked the germ seed of the Genestealers and spread the infection throughout tainted medical, food, and water supplies, spreading the infection without even needing the Genestealers' kiss. The infection spread this way. However, infections spread this way can often yield unexpected results, including hideously mutated aberrants. The Biophagus keeps these mutants in their hidden lair, continuing to experiment upon them, making them faster, stronger, and even more deadly. Patriarchs instinctively value the Biophagus's work and often loan them their familiars. Since the Biophagist often prefers to work in seclusion, these helpers not only act as another set of helping hands, but also as a link to the Patriarch in case any security needs may arise. However, come wartime, the Biophagus acts as a master of biology and chemical warfare, surrounded by a phalanx of hammer-wielding aberrants, hurling their vile concoctions and acids into their foes, which causes them to mutate and even melt, even while they inject their bodyguards with stimulants to goad them into ever more astonishing feats of violence.
Yeah, they're pretty gnarly. Aberrants are like the, like little medical experiments that this guy, it's like his proud little babies, like almost like a Frankenstein and Dr. Frankenstein.
It's funny, you call them little, they're big.
They're big. They're big.
They're big.
Little big babies.
Little big babies.
Kind of has the same mentality as Nurgle.
Yeah. I can see that.
I think it comes more from a Frankensteinish perspective. When I was reading about the
Oh, yeah,
biophagus, I
definitely.
was thinking of like the weird Dr. Mangala experiments.
Yeah, Dr. Mangala.
And
Definitely.
all the like, just like, why the fuck would you do this? But like, they don't care. They literally don't care. They just want to take over the entire planet. So that's why they're doing all this horrible shit. That's why they figured out how to gut a Genestealer and spill its blood into the water to infect everybody.
Yeah. There is one more besides the biophagus. He's kind of a parallel of the biophagus, where the biophagus is like the mad scientist who's all about like genetics and whatnot. There is like a mechanical kind of guy. There's a couple more. There's also like
there's the Saboteur is another version of the Kellermorph.
Just a boomy one.
Yes.
Yeah, so essentially
they
the
make
saboteurs,
movies.
it's exactly what's in the name. You know, they go through, they sabotage factories. They're, the guerrilla warfare fighter that blows stuff up and everybody knows about him. They had the...
He's the guy in every movie that's usually named Mole.
Yeah, right.
He totally that's a good point.
Every
Single fucking time.
Every action movie, there's a guy and his name is Mole, and he's like the demolition excavation expert.
Yeah, did we talk about the Icon Ward or the Alphys?
We did not talk about the Icon. So there's a bunch of stuff. So yeah, we did not yet. We
Okay.
We would.
Are we gonna hold off or?
Yeah. So,
okay.
With all the specialized forces introduced into the 3rd and 4th generation of Genestealer Cult, the Patriarch's grip on a planet will ever tighten, while the mad ravings of the cultists are whipped closer and closer towards the bloody fury of civil war. We will pick back up next episode covering the more rank and file elements of the cult before looking at the gene sex and more infamous cult examples recorded in the Imperium's history. So when we get into that stuff, we're going to talk about neophytes. We're going to talk about neophytes.
Jackals, acolytes.
Yeah. We're going to talk about acolytes, that the more kind of like standard forces. And one of those standard forces is the icon bearers, basically. But they're...
I had no idea there were so many different types.
Oh yeah,
yeah, dude. There's a ton of characters.
Well, yeah.
This is pretty much all. Of
you got skinny jeans. You got
you got 501s. You got fitted.
Bell bottoms.
You got boot cut.
Good Lord.
But yeah, we'll move into again, like I said, kind of more the rank and file. So these are the ones that make up. Everybody we just talked about is the the high specialists. The only one we didn't bring up because they're relatively new, as in they're not in the code. They're not in the 8th or 9th edition codex. They're in one of the Noctum Warzone book is the Saboteur.
He's in the 9th. She's in the 9th. They're in the 9th.
Are they in the 9th?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
Maybe I only have the 7th and 8th edition codex. But the Saboteur I knew about and didn't bring up. I didn't bring up because I figured we were going to talk about him with the Kellermorph, and I kind of forgot. So that's on me.
Good.
But yeah, a lot of the other ones,
Kellermorph and them are all they all parallel one another. Everyone specializes in one thing. It's not like a jack of all trades. Yeah.
So as I've mentioned a couple of times in this episode, the absolute worst part about working on a series of something so steeped in horror like the Genestealers is every single idea that I get as I'm doing research that I like immediately want to go out and start working on, or at least write lore for. I have so many fucking ideas.
Right.
And as a soft tease to everybody, and one of the reasons that you guys should seriously consider joining us on Patreon is our next painting contest is coming up. And since our next painting contest will happen during the chunk of the year that ends on Halloween, it is going to be monster or big vehicle themed. We're actually pushing for that monster theme. And I, as the hosts have started competing in the painting contests, I'm doing a Genestealer Knight conversion.
Nice.
Ooh.
So I've already started to think about the Genestealer Cult that surrounds.
Dude, give him like a big Flava Flav Genestealer Cult freaking medallion, dude.
Medallion on his
that
neck.
Can spin. Yeah.
Speaking of conversions.
Oh my god, man.
I had this crazy idea during our recording. How fun would it be to make a orc commando army that runs on Genestealer rules?
Well, and that's the thing is,
shit.
I don't know how we're
I
going to
feel
cover.
like it would work.
I don't know how we're going to cover it because it's not really part of current Genestealer lore. But Genestealers infected orcoids in the past, and they don't anymore, and they don't anymore for a reason. But it's like kind of rogue trader era. It's early Genestealers. It's the old patriarch model era. And I think we'll probably cover it a little bit more as like bonus Genestealer material. We'll talk about some of the kind of cool stuff that just doesn't really fit in with the current state of lore, I guess.
Yeah, they're able to, but they just don't because it's not efficient, and they're all about efficiency.
It's really
Yeah, they're like, don't touch that green shit.
Yeah. So the main reason for it, the main lore reason for it is that orcs love to fucking fight constantly, and Genestealer cults work as a cohesive unit. So Genestealer cults aren't going to get into a fucking fist fight. So what happens is the orcs figure out really quick when they've been infected with Genestealers because they're like, wait a minute, these guys aren't fighting like normal. What gives?
Yeah,
it's
they're
a little bit
considered
more
not-
in depth than
We
that.
haven't had a daily crump since last week. What's
Yep.
wrong?
Yep, exactly.
They're not considered proper orky in looks
Yeah.
or feels.
Tom's shaking his head at my British
I just
orc
fucking
voice.
hate it. I hate it. I
So-
forgot I'm on camera.
Speaking of all this crazy lore stuff, share your Genestealer tales or questions and comments with us. You can reach us by email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com or jimdarkgaming@gmail.com. The other way that you can get in touch with all of us is by becoming involved in our pretty fucking amazing Discord community. We love to share in your homebrew lore, answer any questions you have, and so much more.
You know,
Yep.
one thing,
Uh-oh.
and I want to do this every fucking time.
Okay.
We have a thing, right? An episode where we talk about like a specific army or whatever. Every single time that we do this, I'm like, I want us all to pick characters. You know what I mean? Like every time I'm like Space Marines, I'm like I want us to have
A Genestealer RPG game would be fun.
Stop
Well, like,
making
yeah,
me
I
make
mean,
RPGs, Kevin.
that
That
like
would be fun, though.
just
Hold
hear me out. Just a character for each army, right? Because we go into such dives, right? Like which one do we, want? Like which one would we be?
You would be an
You know what I
aberrant,
mean?
Tom.
100%. Like 100, not even a discussion. Like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'd want to go through all of these armies because that's immediately I'm like, okay, well, I'd obviously be an aberrant, like, But I'm like, what would like Kevin would totally be the like dirt bike dude with the sniper rifle.
We should do
Jackal.
that. We should do
Yeah.
that. Our post episodes. We should. I like that. I really like
Well,
that.
We'll
Yeah, and I
dive
want to
into
do
it.
it for every. Yeah, because like I was talking about it like in one of our last episodes, I brought it up where we were talking about Space Marines, and I was like, what would we be?
I dig it. Fucking dig it.
It's just what I want. It's what I want. I hate it. I hate it every episode I do this to myself.
So our Discord community also features community-based lore as well as tales from the Hive. So if you want to be involved in any of that stuff, that's a place to connect with us. We get really deep into spooky dooky stuff with our special Loris Obscurus episodes, and we love to share the lore, or not the lore, the stories that you guys have, the experiences that you guys have. So send those to us, and we will feature them as part of the ghost stories that we tell during our spooky dooky episodes. If you want to help the podcast grow, you can do so by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast fix. We are on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, and much, much more. Our home is Anchor and Spotify, so that's a great place to find us right off the bat. Also, leave us those Apple reviews. Those help us immensely. Make sure to follow us, share us with nerds and Warhammer geeks that you think are into all this creative writing and lore stuff, because that's really our aim. We love telling stories. We love getting into the meat of why stories are told. So we want to really engage with as much of that community as we can. Help us grow and help us meet our milestones by joining our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Under the Hive of Madness. We are a DIY operation. It is us doing what we do and pouring our love and admiration for the game and the community into this every week. So helping us through Patreon very much helps us keep the podcast running, helps us increase the amount of things we can do. Plus, as a Patreon member, you'll get access to a video version of our podcast episodes. Not only do those have a little bit extra at the beginning of the episode that kind of keeps you in the know of what we're doing with our hobby, and you get to hear some of the ideas that we're planning, but you also get some images that go along with the episode, and often it's a little bit less edited, so you get a lot of our bloopers and extra cuss words, and when we make weird faces at each other and all sorts of stuff like that. The other
Best way to watch. Just saying, best way to watch.
Yeah, you're enjoying them, huh? That's awesome.
Dude, man. I don't even bother listening to it any other way now.
There you go. The other thing that you get access to, as I mentioned earlier, was that painting contest at our lowest level. Those are both at our lowest level. That $3 level, you get the video episode and you get involved, or you get access to the painting contest. You can join it if you want. You don't have to. But we do a painting contest 4 times a year. We give away a pretty nifty 3D printed and hand painted trophy. We commissioned an artist to make a red squig can. So if you're familiar with any of the little lore bits we've dropped, we actually have a can of red squig with a squig on top of it, and we paint it up and we send it to you. Other things that you can get access to at higher levels is you can get involved in polls, which help us decide where we might take the podcast in the future, as well as some art assets and different stuff that you can use either in generating planets or role-playing game ideas, or hell, if you would like something that we've made, one of our logos or something, in super high res so you can print it out, you get access to that. You can do with it as you will. Please, please, please go and check all that stuff out. All of your help 100% goes back into the podcast and really helps us grow and do what we want. Help us give back to you, essentially. I don't know how to say that other than that way. So
help us do us for you.
Well, gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking about getting the giant sump clam boil. You know, all of the crustaceans, all of the clams, grok sausage meat. Just pour it all on the table and we eat with our hands. Sounds like a fucking plan to me.
Those can't be good for you. They really can't.
You've been eating them for years. Why are you complaining now?
I don't ever pretend that it is.
I mean, you get
really good at cleaning you out.
What do you guys think is in the Sump Crust biscuits you've been eating for the last 4 hours?
I don't ask questions.
Yeah,
just eat it. Just shut up and eat it.
I just food. I put food in my mouth, then it comes out my butt.
Yep. I ain't no Mayos biologist. I don't know what it does on the inside.
It's like pipe cleaner. It just gets you all nice and clean.
I just eat it and let God sort them out.
Right? Just let it out. Just let it out, man. Makes you faster.
Bringing you the loudest and cleanest voice in Vox Friend's mouth. We are 665.66 UHMA Chemrat Radio. Join us next time. Same ratty Vox channel, same ratty attitude.
And remember, I am one with the four-armed emperor, and the four-armed emperor is with me.
I like
and that
it.
might not be a good thing.
I like it.
Where's that forearm going?
These motherfuckers over here, that's all I'm saying.